Existentialism. It's a big one. The philosophy of radical freedom that's fascinated people for generations. But what if its core ideas are built on a fatal flaw? Today, we're taking a look at the analysis from the logical failure of existentialism to put this entire worldview through a serious stress test.
So, it makes this huge promise, right? Ultimate freedom in a meaningless world. But you have to ask, is that promise built on solid rock, or is it just a house of cards? Our source material says that if you look close enough, you'll start to see the cracks in the foundation.
So, to find out for sure, we're going to run two key tests. The first one is all about coherence. You know, think of a strong worldview like a good, solid arch. Every single stone has to support the others. If the main beliefs contradict each other, well, the whole thing is just bound to fall apart.
Okay, let's jump right in with our first test, internal coherence. We're going to look inside the system itself and see if the core beliefs of existentialism are basically at war with one another.
And you know what? Right off the bat, our source points to a huge problem, a massive clash between determinism, the idea that everything that happens is caused by what came before it, and the existentialist claim that we have absolute radical freedom.
So look at this. You've got two main pillars of atheistic existentialism sitting side by side. On one hand, you have the materialist view. We're just physical beings, and our thoughts are basically brain chemistry, all part of a closed system of cause and effect. But then, on the other hand, you have the philosophy's most treasured idea that we are radically, completely, 100% free. You can feel the tension immediately.
The source basically argues that these two ideas just can't exist together. A purely physical machine can't have a non-physical, free-floating will. I mean, to claim it can is like saying there's a ghost in the machine, a concept that materialism itself totally rejects. The critique is simple. You can't have it both ways.
All right, the next internal contradiction that our source brings up is a pretty slick move, a kind of philosophical smuggling. But this time, it's all about morality.
So here's the clash. The philosophy says we have to invent our own values, that there's no such thing as objective good or evil. But it clearly has its own heroes and villains, doesn't it? It praises the authentic person, the one who faces life's absurdity with courage. But it looks down on the person living in bad faith, someone who lies to themselves and pretends they aren't free.
And this raises a huge question. If all values are just made up, what makes authenticity better than self-deception? What's the measuring stick? The source argues that to make that judgment, existentialism has to secretly smuggle in a belief in objective values, the very thing it just told us doesn't exist.
Now, the last internal contradiction our source points out is probably the most famous existential paradox of them all, and it gets right to the heart of the philosophy, the whole problem of meaning.
This is the ultimate head-scratcher. The philosophy kicks off by saying the universe is absurd and our lives have zero built-in meaning, but then it does a complete 180 and says that the most heroic, noble, and, get this, meaningful thing you can do is to bravely face that meaninglessness.
The source calls this a house divided against itself. It's like trying to pull a rabbit out of a hat when there's no rabbit and there's no hat. By saying the struggle for meaning is the ultimate good, the philosophy actually elevates meaning to this supreme value, a value that its own premise of an absurd universe just can't support.
Okay, so the system seems to be fighting with itself on the inside. But now for test number 2, the reality check. Does the map that existentialism draws actually match the territory of the real world we all experience every day? First up, let's put the existentialist view of the universe, this chaotic, meaningless accident, up against what modern science is actually telling us.
And right here, the source points out a huge conflict. Existentialism needs the universe to be absurd, but what has science actually found? A cosmos of mind-blowing precision run by these elegant mathematical laws. I mean, the two descriptions couldn't be more different.
And to really drive this home, the source brings up the fine-tuning of the universe. Scientists have figured out that the odds of the cosmological constant being what it is just by random chance are less than 1 in 10 to the 120th power. That's a 1 with 120 zeros after it. The source says calling that an absurd accident isn't following the evidence, it's ignoring it.
All right, let's zoom in from the vastness of space to us. Let's look at the existentialist claim about what it actually means to be a human being. So a core motto of existentialism is existence precedes essence. The idea is we're born as blank slates, and we just invent who we are. But the source argues this flies directly in the face of reality. I mean, modern science shows we're born pre-wired with instincts, with drives, and a shared human nature that you can find in every culture on Earth.
And finally, let's test the philosophy's really bold claims about morality against our actual, shared, lived experience as humans. And here we see this huge gap between the theory and real life. Existentialism says morality is subjective, that we just make it up. But we all act like some things are just plain wrong objectively. When we condemn something like genocide, we're not just saying, oh, that's not my cup of tea. We're identifying a universal evil. So, after running these two pretty different tests, one looking inside the system and one looking outside, what's the final verdict from our source material? How does this worldview hold up?
The final verdict, according to our source, is pretty brutal. Atheistic existentialism seems to fail on all the key fronts. Internally, its ideas about freedom, morality, and meaning just don't add up. They're logically incoherent. And externally, its big claims about the universe and human nature don't actually match up with reality.
The argument we've walked through today is that this worldview is just fundamentally unstable. It's a philosophy built on ideas that contradict each other while at the same time being contradicted by the world all around us. And all this leaves us with a really crucial question to think about. If internal logic and a solid match with reality are the ultimate tests for any belief system, then what are the absolute non-negotiables for a worldview that you would find truly worth building your life on?